Welcome to the MedEvidence podcast. This episode is a rebroadcast from a live MedEvidence presentation.
So yes, I'm Dr. Stella, and was happy to have you all here. I'd like to tell you a little bit more about myself before we start. I was born and raised in Nevada, and that's where I went to medical school. Came out of the Nevada School of Medicine debt-free, thanks to Uncle Sam and the U.S. Navy. And then they brought me to Jacksonville to put me in residency in the Naval Hospital up in NAS Jax. So that's where it all began. That's where I met my husband. That's where I had my first child. And then the Navy sent us around the world, and eventually back here. And 25 years later, I retired out of the Navy. That was in 2017. And since then, I've been working several part-time jobs. For the last 5 years, let's see, actually closer to 7 years, I've been doing some telemedicine work, some geriatric work in assisted living facilities and homebound patients. And for about 4 years, I did emergency medicine here at Flagler ER and at the Baptist ERs. So I've seen a lot of people with viral problems, a lot of people with, everything from mild viruses, not even sure if they have a virus or if it's, they're just worried, to, lethalities from viral illnesses. And I've seen them in a lot of different settings, from their homes. Now I see a lot of people at home that call in on telemedicine and, with the viral illnesses, asking for help or advice or Paxlovid or treatment. So I talk about this a lot, mostly one-on-one. But here we have a nice little group, and I'm happy about that. All right, so today we're going to focus on preparing yourselves and your loved ones for the flu season that's coming up, the various viruses that tend to be more prevalent during the winter, as Dr. Hayes says, rear their ugly heads. But we're not helpless against that, and there's things we can do to prepare. I'm going to start with a little audience participation here about, this is audience question number 1, trying to identify these viruses and what viruses, the viral villains, which ones do you think are going to be wreaking havoc on us this winter? Could it be the rascally respiratory syncytial virus, RSV? Could it be that cantankerous COVID virus, the infamous influenza virus, the naughty norovirus, the bubonic plague, or all but answer E? I'm hearing answer E. That is correct. First of all, the bubonic plague's a bacteria, not a virus. It is still around, but thank goodness there's good treatments about that, and it's nowhere near as prevalent.
In this area?
Not so much this area. There's, Africa and South America is where it's found mostly, and even then it's just a handful of cases, and the mortality from it is about 10% treated. Whereas untreated, it's closer to 60 to 90%, as evidenced by the Black Death in Europe. But enough about the bubonic plague. We're going to talk about strategies to protect yourself and your family. Another question here: how are y'all going to prepare yourselves and the family? Are you going to throw caution to the wind and sing the song? Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. Or get vaccinated and maybe avoid high-risk, areas. sick people, or if you can't avoid them, try to protect yourself a little bit against what they may be carrying. You can find out about treatment options when you get sick, or you can do all but answer A. Okay, and I think you could even sing the song too, but as long as you take some actions in addition to that. This shows the leading causes of death over the last few years since 2019, and that's a nice little direction for the COVID black mark to be heading straight, down in a steep descent. But this may bring back memories of the bad old days with COVID right up there as far as, a leading cause of death for most of a year when it first came. And we had, no defense against it. We didn't know how to protect against it. We didn't know how to treat it. And our poor little immune systems had seen nothing similar to this. So it really, could hit us hard. But the first and fifth leading causes of death, the heart disease and stroke, are due to atherosclerosis and vascular problems with plaque buildup and stuff. So people who are at high risk for stroke are generally at high risk for heart disease, and vice versa. And we know that that's got some important contributors of lifestyle that can be, changed or modified or minimized. So we highly recommend trying to, get yourself into the best shape you can to avoid the leading causes of death. And there's nothing like a virus to throw you over the edge, especially if you're already, have some comorbidities or some other, medical problems that make your body and your immune system and your organs not as strong and resistant as, a younger, healthier person. This is these are the viruses I'll be talking about. We've all heard of the flu virus or the flu viruses, a whole family of them, and the COVID virus, COVID-19 being the most infamous one. There are other COVID viruses that have been around for a while, but none, unfortunately, that gave us any, immunity to the COVID-19. And then there's RSV. That's been around a long time too. When I was in training and, early in my career, we really only worried about the premature infants in RSV, as they would get RSV and their little airways are so small that if there's a little swelling in there, it can really affect them with wheezing and, poor ventilation. So they developed a vaccine to that for the babies many years ago. But now we've got, more awareness about adults getting it, elderly adults, or, all adults can get it. Most people get it during their lives, but people who don't have, much resistance or cushion for sickness, they suffer greatly from it. The norovirus is one here that we've added in to help increase awareness about the norovirus. I misspoke, but this is the norovirus. It's a acute gastritis that gives, like stomach bug, that makes you have problems with your gastrointestinal system. For kids, it usually makes them lose their lunch. For adults, it kind of gets in there deeper and makes them liquidate their assets. It's the leading cause of vomiting, diarrhea, and foodborne illnesses in the U.S. I'm pretty sure I had it about 18 months ago. after a trip to Honduras. The ironic part is I think I picked it up in Houston, because I was so careful in Honduras and didn't eat any fresh fruits or vegetables or salads hardly, or seafood. But then when I got to Houston, I'm like, oh, I'm going to have a chicken Caesar salad, a big one. And I ate it. And sure enough, about 12 hours later, I got the classic symptoms. And it was miserable. And it's such a, strong virus. It's not, most viruses, you put them out in the air or on a surface and they'll die pretty quickly if they're not, in a host. But this lives on surfaces, and furthermore, it only takes a few particles, one or two viruses to make you sick. Most viruses, you need, a good inoculation with usually like millions of them. And if you only get a couple, say COVID viruses, if you only get a couple COVID viruses, your body's going to take care of that before they make you sick. But with norovirus, it just takes a couple. Affects all ages. It's also unique in that it can stand up against hand sanitizers. So it's really best to wash your hands with soap and water if you're on a cruise, say. This is infamous for, hitting ocean cruise liners, anywhere where there's a lot of people eating together and living together. It's contact, so the oral fecal route. So, it's not airborne, thank goodness, because that would be a disaster, especially considering it only takes one virus, to infect you. So, that's the one good thing about this, is that if you're really careful about, what you touch, your hand washing, what you're eating, how it's prepared, then you can avoid it. If you get it once, it doesn't mean that you can't get it again. So, and why some viruses will give you lasting immunity and some don't, I'm not sure why that happens, but most people have had norovirus at least once in their lives, and it's possible to have it multiple times. The danger of any of the GI illnesses, the two main dangers, becoming dehydrated and having your electrolytes messed up, can be very serious and lethal. And then, so if you can live through the 3 miserable days, usually with just, gentle hydration and rest, and if you need to get in some IV fluid, that'll certainly help get you through it. The norovirus, there's no antiviral against it. It's supportive care. So most people who get norovirus will do like I did and stay in bed. They may call their doctor if they think they're dying, which I actually did. They may have to go in and get some IV hydration, but it's the treatment for it we sometimes call supportive care. So like I said, with the dehydration and electrolytes, if we can keep those balanced, your immune system's going to take care of this. 3, maybe 5 days if if it's really slow. But there's no stomach pumping. I guess if we knew somehow that salad you just ate has norovirus in it, maybe it could induce vomiting. But once you have the symptoms, now you're going to have to get through this 3 days. And there's some medication. Sometimes we'll give anti-nausea medicine if you're throwing up. The antidiarrheals I generally recommend against, because they can prolong the course of a diarrheal illness. You want to kind of let it go. You just want to stay close to a toilet. The antidiarrheals are okay, after 3 days, if you're feeling fine, I want to go back to work, but I still have this urgent, problem that I don't want to be far from. That's when the Imodium might come in handy. We're going to compare getting ready for the virus season sort of to getting ready for the hurricane season. There's, some steps you can take for each of these. Advanced planning, when we don't know, when it's far enough ahead of time. Then there's some more expeditious, protective, ways you can do to, keep yourself healthy. And then the third step is if you get the virus, because it will get you despite the best precautions. Most people in this room, I think, have either had COVID or, have a lot of family members who have. So part of this planning, so advanced preparation, way in advance, just like for hurricanes, you might want to have insurance. You might want to make sure your house has got a little elevation, it's not going to flood. Well, with the viral seasons, there are some good vaccinations out there that can help you get ready for the season. And we'll talk more about, who should really get those, because not all vaccinations are for every person. But there are good ones. But something that is good for every person is to try to get your immune system in shape and to optimize the natural immunity and resistance you have to disease. And that includes just general health. So we know that good nutrition can help. Exercise helps, both in the short term and in the long term. One of the things we learned early on is the fact that a lot of your white blood cells, that's your immune system, the cells that make antibodies and that kind of are the infantry of your immune system, the white blood cells, a lot of them just kind of hang out on the margins of your blood vessels. We say they're marginalized. They're just kind of hanging out. They're not really in circulation, not going out hunting for invaders. But if you get some exercise and get your heart rate going and get that blood circulating, that demarginalizes your white blood cells, gets them back in circulation and gets them acting. So if you think you might have been exposed to something recently, you might, go for a brisk walk, get your immune system revved up, and maybe you'll be able to nip it in the bud. We know that sleep is important, and we know that constant stress reduces your immunity. So stress is bad. A little bit of stress might be good, but constant bad stress is not fun. Let's talk about recommendations for immunizations. First, I'm going to show you what the CDC recommends. So they recommend flu vaccines for everybody 6 months and older. And they recommend it at the beginning of flu season. So that's been out for a long time. The earlier studies they did on that, the military adopted that because the studies were showing that there would be fewer worked missed days. I said that backwards. Fewer missed work days on people who get vaccinated. So even, the young, healthy population of the military, they were highly encouraged to get flu shots. To keep them at work. Sometimes the flu will kind of linger in the spring or come back for another shot in the spring, another round with us in the spring, in which case, if it's February, March, and they're reporting a lot of flu, you might consider another one at that point. The RSV vaccine, so that's been approved this year, and that's recommended for all adults over 75 years of age and people over 60 who are at increased risk for having problems with RSV. So that's a virus that hit our family early this spring. My husband lost his sister, who was 64 years old, and his brother-in-law, who was 65 years old, to RSV in the same month of March. And there are certainly two people who should have been vaccinated. I'm not sure if they were. I kind of think they weren't, but they had other risk factors, and they were both taken from their children in the month of March from this virus. So this is a bad year for it. Winter seems to be pretty bad for it in general. But I'm glad there's some protection out there now for people who would be at high risk for, dying from it or, being really sick from RSV. Any heart disease would be a risk factor. And then, just age and pretty much, the more medical diagnoses you have, the higher risk you'd be. Whether that's, kidney disease, liver, even something like Crohn's disease or affects nutrition and can affect the immune system. Any of the autoimmune diseases can affect how efficient your immune system is. The COVID vaccine, the CDC is recommending the vaccine for everyone, and then the booster. Also, they're recommending that. So this year, the booster, these 3 companies are making it, and they tried to target it towards the strains that are going around. That's pretty hard with as fast as COVID changes, and with as little time as we've had with it. All right, and then the norovirus. The vaccine, there's not a vaccine against it, and this kind of goes back to your question about can't you treat the norovirus? Well, you can't treat it. And can you vaccinate against it? That's a good question. I'm going to get to that more because we're actually doing a study on that. So we'll tell you all about it. But first I want to talk about some good news with the flu. So there's whole families of flu. There's the A family, flu A, influenza A, and the B family, the influenza B, and each of those families have multiple members. And the scientist's job every year is to try to figure out which ones are most prevalent and to vaccinate against them. And that doesn't really change real quickly, but it does change gradually. Up until this year, we'd been using the quadrivalent vaccine that protected you against 4 types of flu influenza viruses. The H1N1, you remember when that was a bit of a epidemic a few years ago. And then the H3N2 is a prevalent one, and then the influenza B, the Victoria type. The good news is that there used to be another influenza B, the Yamagata, and that hasn't been detected since 2020. So we think that one has gone extinct. We'll see. So they're not having to add that to vaccines. All right, and then the RSV vaccines, there's 3 of those approved. The mRESVIA, that's the mRNA vaccine that is for RSV. Because it turns out with the mRNA, that technology is quite versatile. You can rev it up very quickly to a new virus. And then that's how we were able to get the COVID vaccines out so quickly, incredibly quickly compared to other vaccines that took, decades to, develop. The mRNA was kind of ready to go, just waiting for, which message do you want us to send? They were all these messengers, RNAs, ready to go out and give messages. What message do you want us to send? And part of that is thanks to Dr. Hayes' work at Mayo developing mRNA technology. So it's a very versatile type of technology to have, and I think it's really making a good impact. All right, so the RSV has the protein antigen. Those are the older vaccines that are still very good and still being used. That's FDA approved down to 50 years old. So just because it's approved by the FDA doesn't mean it's really recommended. So the CDC, as I said, recommends it for people, everyone over 75, and then people over 60 who have other conditions. The RSV is the mRNA, and the Brisbo is the other one that's out there. So you've got 3 options, and they're all protective. I don't recommend one over the other personally, but I do recommend you get it if you're at risk for a severe case of RSV. And one last comment about RSV, kids carry it. So if you have grandchildren, snotty-nosed grandchildren that are all over you all the time, and I hope some of you are blessed with that, that they do carry viruses. And, if you have a lot of interaction with little kids or school-age kids, that would be one more factor to consider as far as if you're going to get vaccinated. So for the norovirus, since there's no vaccine out yet, you have to take other measures to prevent, catching it. So it's good to wash your hands with soap and water. Good to make sure the shellfish is thoroughly cooked, especially in certain parts of the world or the country. The warmer waters, it's easier for norovirus to live on the shellfish. Disinfectants help. And then the vaccination is available in clinical trials, and we're doing one. So that's people who would be eligible for that are anyone over 18. And the trial includes, the vaccine versus a placebo, and, trying to figure out if the vaccine is worth it to give to people if they get to bypass those 3 to 5 miserable days of having the norovirus. We love to enroll people in those types of, studies that, most people qualify for. Some of our studies are only for people with, severe heart failure, with these criteria. But this one, most people would qualify for if you're 18 or over, if you want to help out with the norovirus study. So step 2 in this hurricane prep and virus prep is to, during the viral season, to, be a little more careful about your exposures. Yeah, you want to, try to avoid going to places where there may be a lot of sick people. If I can't avoid that because I work with sick people, so I try to just not get exposed or not get that critical number of viruses that would give me the sickness. And having test kits on hand can come in handy. The home testing, they sell tests for flu and COVID, a lot of times in the same swab. And that can be very helpful. That's worked out well with telemedicine. So when people call me for telemedicine, sometimes they'll have their case all wrapped up. They'll say, I just got back from Canada or London or wherever, and somebody was coughing on the plane, and my husband got sick yesterday, and now I'm sick, and we just both tested positive for COVID. And, we're worried because we have diabetes or for whatever reason, they're worried that they're going to get really sick and they want some Paxlovid. And so sometimes some of those cases are pretty cut and dry. It's like, okay, here's your Paxlovid. Thank you for, putting this all together. And if they hadn't had that home test, it'd be just a little more questionable. It's like, well, there's a lot of other things going around right now. How do we know it's COVID? Better than a telemedicine service with a stranger is telemedicine with your own doctor if they are offering that service. Long COVID. COVID, made such an impact on the world, and there's a few, mostly bad, of course, but there's a few good things that came out of it. one of the things I appreciate from it is it really gave people a respect for viruses. Before COVID came, it was so common for me in the emergency room to see a person who's sick and they think they're dying. But, their chest x-ray's okay, their labs are okay, they're oxygenating fine, and, their blood counts show us it's probably not, a bacterial problem. They don't have sepsis or anything. And so we'll tell them, it looks like you've got a virus. And they'll say, just a virus? Viruses don't make you feel like this, Doc. It's got to be something else. Can't be just a virus. Well, people aren't using that term as much now with COVID. It's like, okay, it's a virus, that I've got, whether that's COVID or some other virus that's making them feel miserable. Back to the question, though. Long-term COVID. Okay, yeah. So long COVID. The reason I started with the respect for viruses is because these long-term symptoms from a viral illness have been described before. You're familiar with chronic fatigue syndrome. That's what can happen after the Epstein-Barr virus gets you. And then other viruses, named or unnamed, have caused prolonged problems with people. But COVID really takes the cake as far as having the most members in the long COVID club. COVID was so different in so many ways. The way it hit different people different ways as far as symptoms. And, the number of people who report lingering symptoms after a severe case of COVID. Fatigue is almost always one. The cough from COVID can last for months. Long COVID often has, doesn't have to have a cough. It doesn't, there's no, one particular symptom it has to have, although fatigue is pretty much a must, I think. Autonomic dysfunction, where you get tired real easily, shortness of breath, inability to, do the same amount of exertion you had before. That will affect you for a time after pretty much any respiratory illness you get. You're not going to be able to jump right back to climbing 3 sets of stairs or however much you could before. But with long COVID, those lingering symptoms go longer. So it's not so much the particular symptoms. There's a whole slew of them. So some people have GI symptoms, with memory, brain fog. Yeah, that is, that and fatigue are probably the top two. The older you are when this happens, the longer the brain fog can last, and the longer you're going to have to wonder, is this going to get better or not? Because, cognitive decline is a thing, unfortunately. And, it affects, a great number of people to some degree. And so if you're, none of us, could learn as quickly as we could when we were in high school, as far as memorizing things, being able to think quickly and learn new things. I think, I don't want to speak for everybody here, but I know I certainly have a lot more trouble, learning new things than I did. So, some of that is, kind of a expected decline in cognition. When you get a COVID virus or any severe illness that throws you for a loop, you can get brain fog. Some medications cause it, some treatments cause it. And I know it's very unsettling and concerning, especially for people who, don't know if it's going to go away. But unfortunately, there's no real treatment for brain fog or for, cognitive decline. You can't blow the fog out. So, you just have to wait and see, I guess. If you or someone is, has that brain fog, and I know it's very frustrating and very concerning. If you don't know if you're going to be able to think the way you used to think or that you want to think, and it can affect a lot of aspects of your life.
Is there any validity to the vitamins, Viber, whatever, that they're advertising on TV?
Oh yeah, there's vitamins being sold for memory,
Are
and
they valid, or is that?
well, we know that good nutrition is helpful, and we know that food is medicine, and if you're getting the right nutrients, then that can make a big difference in your mental health and your cognitive health as well as your physical health. As far as the supplements, I think that's very individual, and it probably depends a lot on your diet. We know that getting substances through food is better than getting substances in a pill. Food has all the other, other substances you need to absorb that, fish oil that's in the fish. Whereas the fish oil in the pill doesn't have all the other extra proteins and stuff that may help its function. So I'd say with the medications and stuff, as far as I know, most of them are safe. I think I think one of the biggest downsides to them is their cost. Yeah. They're very expensive, and I don't think they've really been proven to help things. So I know when I was doing my neurology rotation at Mayo Clinic, when I was a resident, a lot of people would come in with memory issues, and at that time they were recommending vitamin E. They stopped doing that because they showed that actually no, it's not helping. So and there's others that have kind of come and gone as far as supplements that are showing some promise or might show some promise, but unfortunately most of them have failed. They are making some advancements in medications for like dementia, for Alzheimer's, but that's another topic altogether. All right, so step 3, if you've been unable to avoid getting sick, what are you going to do when the virus gets you? Well, there's lots of home remedies, and some of them are helpful and some of them are not. The ones that are helpful, I'll tell you right now: rest and hydration. Definitely helpful. The ones that are not, there's a long list of that. And then there's, probably some that, well, vitamin C is showing pretty well, especially if taken early in the course of a virus. And zinc, might be helpful. We were recommending that for COVID, zinc and vitamin C, and vitamin D. But again, those don't have the legs or the history and hard proof of rest and hydration as being good home remedies. Quarantine is more of a way to try to make the buck stop here as far as not passing your virus on to other people when you're sick. These antivirals, Paxlovid and Tamiflu. So Paxlovid is for COVID and Tamiflu is for the flu. Those are much more available now. When they first came out, I'll talk about Paxlovid. When it first came out, we were really stingy with it. And it's like, you don't qualify because you're only 64 and you're too healthy for this. We're saving this for, the 90-year-olds or the 102-year-olds and the people with more medical problems. Now they'll give it to anybody. Not to say that I recommend it for everybody, young, healthy, young people in their 20s, 30s, 40s even, 50s, if they're healthy. I often will kind of talk them out of taking Paxlovid. But people who are, it was developed to keep you out of the hospital. Paxlovid. So people who are at risk for getting really sick with COVID. Paxlovid is a nice way to take the easy route. It kills the virus for you. So usually feel better pretty quickly on Paxlovid. And there's some pros and cons, just like there are with any medication, but it's out there, and your doctor will help decide if you're a good candidate for it. As far as other treatments, it's kind of like the norovirus. It's supportive care for, COVID. So when people were getting this terrible COVID pneumonia that made your lungs look like cotton balls on the x-ray and, was killing people, what we could do for them is give them oxygen, because if you're taking oxygen supplementation, you can oxygenate a lot better, even if your lungs aren't working real well. Sometimes ventilation, like if, sometimes the ventilators would help just get that oxygen in there and get you through the COVID pneumonia. But, usually it wasn't severe enough to need a ventilator, thank goodness. Well, at least those who survived it didn't have it severe enough to need a ventilator, and they were supported with, fluids or electrolytes or, cough remedies, symptomatic treatment. And there's a lot of that. All right, another question here. This is about home remedies. Which of these historical remedies for the flu have been proven effective? The onion necklace, that's what the ladies there are demonstrating.
I wonder what that was.
A glass of whiskey, that's a popular remedy.
That's what I use.
Okay. Hydrogen peroxide in the ear.
Oh my God.
Mom's chicken soup.
Oh, chicken soup.
Or none of the above.
Probably none of the
Some people are kind of edging towards the chicken soup, but officially it's none of the above. Yeah, I would question that too. I think some chicken soup can do a lot for the soul and for the body. But, so can a glass of whiskey. So, yeah.
You won't remember.
Chase, that was fine. Chase it
Going back to your question about long COVID, so viruses can give you prolonged problems, and there's a lot of factors. Why do some people get long COVID and some people don't? And there's more factors than we know. But one factor that seems to play a role is the severity of the illness you get. So if you had a really bad case of COVID, you're at higher risk for having long COVID. But this slide's mainly showing how the vaccines sort of reduce the risk for long COVID. People who were getting the original virus, well, let's see, this talks about the Delta, actually. That was like the second major wave of COVID. Because the original one, we didn't have the vaccine, so we can't really study that one. But for Delta, in the Delta era, so the purple line's there. So the top line, those were unvaccinated people who had got the Delta, which was a very severe strain of COVID, and you can see their incidence of long COVID was much higher than people had been vaccinated here, this purple line, in the Delta era. That was the most demonstrative or clearly seen. And then in the Omicron era, that's the green line, the same thing happened there. The unvaccinated in the pre-Delta era, so that's from the original wave that came through. That was very similar to the Delta wave that hit unvaccinated people. All right, this is our next to last question. What percentage of the U.S. adults have been vaccinated with the updated, this year's vaccine, in the last 12 months? We'll take a vote here. Do you think it's as high as 75%, 55%, 22%? Whoa, I gave away the answer. Sorry. That was your guess. All right, yep, good. And this was in May, so it probably is a little higher than 22% now. So I like this slide because it goes back to the seasonal variation of these viruses, the COVID, influenza, and RSV, and you can kind of see the seasonal pattern. So this is you kind of lumping it all together in the U.S. I'm sure there are some data sets that tweeze it out as far as what about Michigan versus Florida. But overall, there certainly is a kind of seasonal variation to be hitting in the winter. Now, COVID kind of got out of bounds here this summer and gave us another good spike. Fortunately, it wasn't a real severe strain like Delta, and it wasn't killing people as much or as effectively as the previous COVIDs. And yeah, that's my hope, that COVID will continue to just get a little weaker in general, and then our immunity is kept high enough that it's not so much of an issue for us anymore. I think people now are more aware of contagious diseases, and the fact that if you're right up together with a bunch of people, there's a higher chance of having a virus out there. Even people who aren't symptomatic yet might be shedding some viruses in the air they breathe out. But certainly people who are coughing and have a fever are probably spewing viruses, and keeping your distance from them is a good idea. Some clinical trials. So here in St. Augustine, in this very site, we've got clinical trials for the norovirus. Touched briefly on that, so we're enrolling for that right now. But also a very exciting news we got very recently is that we're preparing to do a study on COVID boosters of oral versus shot. So wouldn't that be awesome if you could get your COVID booster in the form of a pill instead of a shot? And this center here may help answer that question to see if that's a viable option going forward. In Jacksonville, they're doing an influenza mRNA trial for people 50 years and older. So that's just seeing if there's a better flu shot out there. And they're also doing the oral COVID vaccine booster in Jacksonville too. So if you have anybody who thinks might be interested in doing that, have them keep in touch with us. All right, so the key takeaway points from this are to try to be prepared for the viral season. Don't just sing the song, try to get yourself prepared, have a plan. And, your plan, be prepared for what if I do get it. You can do a lot of the figuring out beforehand if you're a good candidate for Paxlovid or for, antiviral therapies. And so by the time you get, COVID or a flu, you might know if you should be in touch with your doctor, or if you should just, if people who don't really need those antivirals, they're just going to tough it out at home like they would any other virus, unless they get really sick, in which case they'll come to the hospital and we can give supportive care and help them recover. All right, the last question here about the Spanish flu, because, COVID isn't our first rodeo as far as bad viruses that have really taken a toll on the populace. It happened a little over 100 years ago, the Spanish flu. Who in here has had a relative who died in the Spanish flu? Anyone? Yeah, I had a great-great-uncle who died of that. 50 million deaths worldwide.
Oh my God.
It started like a flu. sore throat, chills, fever, and then usually get you through your lungs. Yeah, the soldiers were hit hard, so that was during the war, and you know, a lot of barracks housing together. Oops. And it was caused by one of our old familiar friends, or one that we've been reacquainted with when it came out again in like, what, 2009 or something, H1N1. So we're getting vaccinated. If you take the flu shot, you're getting vaccinated against the Spanish flu. But it's still out there after 100 years, causing problems. And that was considered the world's deadliest flu pandemic, you know, from a flu virus. Which of these answers is correct? All of the above. Very good. Smart audience. Okay. All right, great.
Thanks for joining the MedEvidence podcast. To learn more, head over to medevidence.com or subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform.